Hello guys, welcome to React.js Fundamentals. In this lesson, we are going to learn the basics of React, enough to get you started working with React. So you can dive deeper into the library as you progress as a React developer. Some of the things we are going to learn and also demonstrate, of course, are JSX and React component. We are going to see how we can embed JavaScript in our React and display different kind of data, including object, list, etc. We're also going to see how we can make our code more reusable using components, and how we are going to customize our components to do different things. We're going to learn about props. We are going to learn about how the components can manage their own states internally, as well as how different components can communicate through what is called lifting the state. We are going to learn a few hooks as well, and a number of other things actually. So instead of the talking, let's get to the code. There are different options for creating a React project, and one of them is the library called Create React App, which is what we are going to make use of. It doesn't require any serious configuration. Basically, you just need to have Node.js and npm installed and you are good to go. So the requirement is you need to have the Node.js greater than or equal to version 14 and of course npm. Most times when you have Node.js installed, you also have the npm installed. You can check what version you have or if you have it installed at all by running node-v on your terminal. As you can see, I have Node version 16 available. And to check npm, we can do something similar. npm-v, I have npm. So if you don't have Node.js or npm installed, please make sure to install that first. With Node.js and npm available, we can create a new React project by running the command npx create React app. Then you give the app a name. You can call it anything. In this example, it is called my app. So let me copy this and head over to the terminal. I will paste and hit enter to create a new React project called my app. Hit enter and we wait. Actually, I get a prompt asking to install the package. Yeah. And then we wait for the project to be created. Now that the project has been created, we can go into the project, navigate into the project using cd my app. I'm inside the project now. I can open the project in VS Code. Here is the new project we just created. Open in VS Code. To start the app, go back to the terminal and run npm start. This will start the app at the localhost 3000. That is the URL you can visit on your browser when the app has started. The app is starting, just a moment. So we have the project up and running. Let's go back to the code and learn the basics. Over to the project, I have this file called app.js. The app.js is what is responsible for what we can see on the screen here on the browser. So this app.js is a JavaScript file. By the extension, of course, you can see that it's a .js file. But you notice that what we have on the screen looks like HTML, right? It looks a bit weird that we have HTML in JavaScript. That brings us to the first thing we want to talk about. In React, we use what is called JSX to handle the user interface, what is seen on the screen. For example, you can see this edit, blah blah, and save to reload, which is the text we are seeing here. That is coming from app.js file. So this is not really HTML per se. This is what we call JSX. It is a developer-friendly way of writing React component. That is what we see on the screen. Behind the scene, React has a way to translate this JSX into some JavaScript syntax. JSX is equivalent to React.createElement, but the React.createElement syntax is not so developer friendly. It is easier to work with something that looks like HTML, in this case this JSX, instead of React.createElement, but they give similar results. So React makes it easier for us by giving us this JSX, which is similar to HTML and is developer friendly. JSX has some rules that you need to be aware of. The first one I want to mention is that it should return only one element. What that means is at the top level, right? If I collapse this div, you can see that there is only one element, although it can have children inside it. It can have other elements inside it. This div has header, it has paragraphs, etc. But everything is nested inside one element. So you cannot have inside that return statement another element like this. This will throw an error. So always return one element. If you must have two or multiple elements at top level, you can use a fragment, right? So you can use something like this, Now I can return multiple items. Let me put some text here so that we can see it on the screen. This is a fragment. There's another syntax for writing it. If I head over to the page, you are going to see that the contents of the divs are displayed over here. But when I inspect the element, you will notice here we have the two divs, but the fragment doesn't show up on the screen. That is the way it behaves. The fragment does not add a new element to the DOM, doesn't add new element to the page. The root, the div with id root is actually coming from index.html file, which is here. That is where everything that we are creating, all the component kind of gets rendered between this inside this div, the root. But the fragment doesn't add new element to the DOM. The next thing I want to talk about is the return statement here. This is actually not peculiar to React or JSX, but it is oftentimes a mistake that beginners make. When we remove the parentheses from the return statement, we might get an unexpected behavior. If I go over to the browser, now everything disappears because this return statement is kind of different from whatever that comes after it without the parentheses. My ID is automatically formatting, adding the semicolon, right? So always make sure that you wrap the return statement inside the parentheses or bring up the element tag at the same line with the return statement. In that case, this still works. And once again, my ID is automatically adding the parentheses, but I think you get the idea. If you have the return statement on a separate line without the parentheses, and then you have your component, your element on the next line, you might get an unexpected behavior. Another thing about JSX is that it is a bit different from the way we write normal HTML tags. For example, in HTML, at least modern HTML, you can write break statements, break tag like this, no issues. But in React JSX, you have to put the self-closing slash, right? So you can't just write something like this. Now let's talk about how we can embed JavaScript in our JSX. So for example, let's say we have name. Let's see. Ooh. If I head over to the browser, we see that text. But oftentimes we don't have things hard coded in our JSX. Sometimes we might want to display data that is coming from maybe JavaScript object, some remote API, database, etc. We need to display that JavaScript data in our JSX. To embed JavaScript in our JSX, we use the curly braces. So here you can pass whatever JavaScript expression. For example, 1 plus 3 is 4. You can do whatever JavaScript expression that you want to pass here. For example, let's say we have user object, user to be equal to name is John Doe, and avatar is, let me use this link from Pixabay. Over here we can display the name of that user.name, just normal JavaScript, right? And we get that. We can also do something similar for HTML tags, the attribute values. For example, let me have image. I will remove this and pass the curly braces. Here I will say user.avatar. Save that, head over to the page, and we get that output. The bottom line here is that we use the curly braces to display or to embed JavaScript in our JSX. Sometimes we might need to embed an entire object. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have styles to be color red. Save that. I want to apply the styles to this h2 element. I can come here and say star and then styles. I will embed the entire styles object and then head over to the browser. We have the red text according to our style. Of course, this is equivalent to putting this object inside here. So sometimes you might see something that looks like this, just an object for attribute that can take object, in this case the style attribute. Of course, oftentimes we have the styles in the separate file. This is just for demonstration, like this one that is imported here. We have the style on a separate file and then we import it. So I can go ahead and remove this style attribute, save that. Let's go to app.css. This is the style that was imported. I can come here and do the same style. I think what you have is h2. Let me change the color to blue, for example, whatever, blue something. This is our h2. If I go over here, you can see that the style still applies. That is how you can apply style, and of course you can embed objects for attribute that takes objects. Now let's talk about conditionally rendering something. What that means is, for example, let me delete this. I can leave it there. Let's say we have another value here. Let's say age is 16 or 14. Then we can come down here and tell whether this user can drive is eligible to drive according to the age or otherwise. Let me put h4 down here. There are different ways we can do this. For example, I can come here and use ternary operator inside the curly braces. I can say user dot age greater than 16. I'll put a text can drive, otherwise cannot. So you are not eligible to drive if the age is not greater than 16. Here we get cannot drive because the age is not greater than 16. This is a case where we need to display something if the condition passes or it fails. A typical use case for ternary operator. Of course, we can put maybe empty array here and the second case doesn't display. Or better still, instead of doing that, we can say we can use the double ampersand operator like this, age and can drive. I will save that. Not age, sorry, age greater than 16, and then so it means that whatever that comes, the expression after the double ampersand will be displayed if the condition on the left hand side means. This is basically like the way JavaScript ampersand, the AND operator works. The first truthy is if there's a truthy, it goes to the next one and then basically returns the last one. So this is another way we can conditionally display something. Another way we can achieve this is to come outside here. Let's say let can drive be just let can drive. Then we can say if user.age is greater than 16, then can drive, or let's call it can drive message, I don't know, whatever. Can drive message should be can drive, else can drive message is not eligible to drive. Then down here, let me remove this entire thing and put can drive message. We head over to the browser and we get the message not eligible. Of course, if we change this age to, let's say 22, we get can drive. Now let's talk about how to display lists. Let's say, for example, we have users' favorite colors. Let's just say favorite colors. Let that be an array of blue. Then I head over down here, and once again we use the curly braces. I say user dot favorite colors dot map. We use map to display list of items inside our JSX from arrays, right? So this will give us each of the colors, and then we can have arrow function. This is our arrow function, nothing React specific. This is just arrow function. Here we return an element. Let's return li and then the color. Save that, go to the page, and we have the list of colors. One important thing to remember whenever you display list of items in React is that each of these elements should have a unique key that React uses internally to uniquely identify the element and do whatever optimizations that React does behind the scenes. For example, if this is not with the key, if I inspect this page, we are going to see an error that says each child in a list should have a unique key prop. But when we add the key, that goes away. And the key has to be something unique. So let's make use of the index. When you have map like this, the second argument is the index of the element in that array. So we can pass I here, that is the index, as the unique key. Then refresh the page, the error goes away. One thing to note about the key is that it should be applied to the topmost element. What that means is that, let's say we have a div here, we have a div, and then inside that div we have the li. If I inspect the page again, you will notice that we will have that error. Inspect the page, you see that the error comes back because we applied the key not to the topmost component. The key should be applied here and not to inner elements. So when we refresh the page, the error goes away. Always remember that. Let me undo this because we don't need the div. Now let's look at how we can handle events with at least one example. I think I can delete the user for now. Delete everything here. I will just put a button that says click me. What we want to do is to listen to the click event that happens on the button. How we do that is that we come here and say on click. What do we want to happen when that click happens? We can say handle click. Now what we pass here is the function, the name of the function that should be called when that event is fired. I will come over here and create that function. Let's have an arrow function. Come on. I will simply say alert clicked. Click on the button, we get the alert clicked. So this is the basically how you handle events. Not all events, there are different ways, like on select for form select and all that. One thing to take note of here is that you don't call the function. This is not a function call. What I pass is the function that should be called when that event is fired. So you don't come here and call the function. You don't want to do that. Just pass the function, then you come here and define the function. Next, we talk about managing state, updating the state of the JSX component. To demonstrate this, instead of alert, I want to count how many times this button is clicked and display the output. So I'll come here and let me have an H2. I'll say clicked 1 times. Save that. Over here it says clicked 1 times. But if I click on this button, or let me start with 0, actually not 1 because it has not been clicked. If I click on the button, that makes it 1 click. I click again, 2, 3, 4. I want to have a way to show how many times the button is clicked. In React, we can make use of what is called hook. They are just things that are provided for us, functions that we can just call and they do magic. We can also create our own custom hooks. The hook we are going to make use of to track the number of clicks, in other words, to manage the state, is called use state. So the way we can use that is we say const, I'll come back to that array in a moment, use state. Here is the something we want to keep the state or manage the state, and then the next value is a function we can call to update that value, to update the state, update something. Something can be anything, right? For example, it can be clicks, to track number of clicks, and then here we say set clicks. That is the convention. Whatever we have here it is preceded with set and then that. In camel case, it is a convention. What that means is that we can display how many clicks. Instead of hard coding 0 here, we come here and put curly braces for expression embedding JavaScript in our JSX, and then we display the number of clicks. We can give this an initial value. Oftentimes we want to do that. We start with 0. I will save that, head over to the page. You can see that we have that 0 displayed. But what we want to happen is that when we click on that button, remember that this second value is used to update the state. We can just say set clicks. We update how many clicks that has happened. What we can do is, I will come back to this in a moment. I will say 1 time. When I click, it changes to 1, right? Because that is what we are doing here. But if I click again, now the answer is not correct because I've clicked more than 1 time. So we can basically grab the previous clicks and add 1 to it. I will save, refresh this, we are back to 0. Now when I click, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This keeps track, it keeps the state, and this updates the state. So use state is just one of the hooks that React provides us out of the box. There are a number of other hooks that you get to learn as you progress as a React developer. Another one that is quite common is use effect. Let me quickly just mention that. So use effect takes a function and then an array as a second argument. This effect, this hook runs the first time the component is rendered. So I can do console dot, let me do alert effect. So the first time the component renders, the effect runs. The reason this is the alert is displayed 2 times is because of the strict mode and development environment, some configuration that has to do with this thing here. So let me just remove that guy. I will go back to the page. You can see that it runs only once. That is one. Another thing about use effect is that it runs whenever the dependency, this second argument, the array, takes the dependencies. Those are the things that when they change, if any one of them changes, the use effect will run again. For example, let me add the clicks, which changes, and I will save that. So what will happen is that the first time the component is rendered, the effect runs. When I click, it runs again. I click, it runs again, because this variable, this value here, is changing, is being updated. If there's no change, it's not going to run. Let me comment this out. Save, refresh the page, it runs on the first time. Click, 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 click. It's not changing because this value is always 0. It is not being updated. One thing to note about hooks is that you can, oh come on, let me remove this. Let me remove this alert. One thing to note about hooks is that you can only call hooks at top level. What that means is that I cannot come inside this function and call a hook. I already get the error that I cannot call it inside a function. That means you call hooks directly inside the parent function, not inside a nested function or statement. Another way to call hook is calling the hook inside another hook. So take note of that. So far, we have been working with the component that was created when we created this project. Now, a component is React basically returns JSX, right? So this is app component. It returns JSX. What should be displayed on the page? But we can create more components. Let's say we have button that we want to look certain ways anywhere it appears. It's going to be repetition. If on every page we have the button, we have to apply the styling and apply other information to it. What we can do is to create a reusable component. Let me create a file called button.js. By the way, you can name this JS, you can also name it JSX, because eventually a component returns JSX at the end. So I will call this button.jsx. Here I will have a function which I will export as well. Export default function button. Our component will return a JSX at the end. Let me just return a button that says click me. I will save that. We can use this component just similar way we've been using the HTML element. So I can come over here. Instead of this guy, I'm just going to put the button that I created. Make sure to import that button. Save that. Go over to the page. We still have button. Now there are a couple of things about components. Before it becomes clearer, let's just come here and let's type our button. For that, I'm going to create a style CSS file. We are going to make use of what is called styled module CSS. Actually, CSS module. It is as simple as naming. Let's call this button dot module dot css. So when you have this dot module dot css, you already have your module CSS module. I will save that. How do we use that module CSS? Let me have a class called button, or let me call it btn. Let's say background color blue. I will save that. Then I'll head over to the button.jsx and import that CSS module. Import classes from button.module.css. You can name this whatever you want. Of course, I just named it classes. Then this basically gives us access to the classes, to whatever we define here. In this case, I have the button class. Then we can just apply those classes as attribute value to our element. Here I will say class name to be styles.btn. Save that. And by the way, this is how you use class. You know, in HTML you say class whatever. But because we are dealing with JSX and the class is a keyword in JavaScript, we use class name whenever you want to pass a class. For other things like ID, no issues, you can just use ID. But for class, we say class name. So it doesn't conflict with class, which is a keyword in JavaScript. Now I head over to the browser. You can see that our button is colored. So the module, CSS module, is one of the ways we can apply styling in our React JSX. But what I want to do is, let me just style this button. Further border, I don't want the border, 0 border radius. Give it some border radius of 6 pixels. I don't know what I'm doing, just trying to make the button look a bit, just look better. Color and FFF, that is white. Okay, looks better, I guess. Let me add some padding to the page. I'll head over to app.css, remove this and add container padding 5%. Then in app.js, let me change this to div, apply the class is container. Save that and check the page. Now we have some padding. One of the benefits of components is that they are reusable. For example, we can use this button component at different pages for different actions. I have two use cases here, and if I go to the page, of course, I see two buttons. Another thing about components is that they are highly customizable. For example, you notice that the buttons, they have the same title. We can pass the title of the button using what is called props. Now, props are just read-only attributes that we can pass to the component. Let's say that I don't want to hard code this title here. I will pass props wherever this button is used. Just imagine this to be some kind of object that's going to have different properties. So I can have title, props.title as part of the attributes of the props. It means that over here in app.js, where we are making use of this, we pass an attribute called title. Let's call this one load post. And this one, let's say, can call it anything. Let's say photos. I will save that. Then over to the page, you can see that we are able to customize the title of our button. Of course, this can take multiple props. For example, for the handle click, we can, let me go over to the button. We can have one implementation every time the button is clicked, which is often not the case. That means, let's say const load post to be this, alert props dot title. I will save that. Then when this button is clicked on click load posts, I will save that, head over to the page, click the button, it says load post, click on photos, it says load post. Now you can have a function here if that is what you want, but if it's something dynamic, in this case you can see that even if you want to, we click on photos, it says load post, because this is the function that is always called. We can as well pass that function as props, just like we did for title. So we can say dot handle click, let's name it that. You can name it whatever you want. Then over here in app.js, let me have two functions, load posts and another one, load photos. Actually, let me leave the previous function that we had there and have these two. Now we can have different actions that should be performed depending on which button that is clicked. For this one, I can say the props name is handle click. So handle click, we say load posts, and for this handle click, load photos. Now when I click the button, this function will be called. When I click this will be called for the click event. Let's quickly try that out. Actually, okay, yeah, that is working, because what is happening here is that I am updating the state. I can just alert load photos, do the same thing here, alert load post. Refresh the page, click load post photos. So this is how we can customize our component using props. Instead of having to type props dot the property each time, let's just destructure what is inside the props, title, and handle click. Now we can remove the props dot something. Props dot. We save and everything still works the same. Remember that props are read only, but we can assign default values. For example, to the title, let's have a default called click me. We save because we passed the title to two of the buttons, so the default is not applied. But let's say for the post, for the photos, I remove the title, then we have the default click me. The relationship we have between the app component and the button component are like parent and child. So the app component is where we call the button component. We pass props from the parent to the child, right? So we are using the button component here and we pass props. But this button component is a fully qualified component, just like app component. For example, the way we had the state in the app component, we can equally have the state here. Const clicks set clicks to be equal to use state initially 0. And we can come here and let me use fragment, have an h3 there, and then paste this, have the clicks. So just like before, on click, let me just call set clicks directly here. Clicks plus 1. This also works. So this is just another component. With the use state hook as we have it here, it means that this component, this button component, can manage its own state, the state of the click at least, independently, independent of wherever, whatever other component. Even in the case where, let me restore this title, photos, even if we use that button multiple times, each use case will have its own state managed independently by the use state that we have internally here. What that means is that as we have these two buttons on the page, if I click the load posts, the state for the number of clicks will be managed separately from when I click on photos. I'll click, you can see that only the one for posts is counting up. This one manages this state independently. Now when I click for photos, you can see the count working separately. Sometimes you would like to share data between components. So for example, let's say that we want to keep the total count, or whether it is this button that is clicked, or this button, or any other button. For our button component, we want to know the total count. In that case, what we are going to do is to manage the state in the parent where this button component is used. So I will remove this from here. I will restore the handle click like we had before. Also remove this and save that. What we are going to do is just to call this function that is from the props whenever the button is clicked, and then manage the number of clicks from the parent. So over here, instead of calling the load post and all that, let me pass handle click. And then for the buttons, I want to display something else. Let me still have that h3 here. h3 clicks props.clicks. Actually, let's destructure that as well. It means that for the props, we are going to pass the number of clicks. So I'll come over here and let me remove, okay, I can leave it there. Clicks to be equal to clicks. What is going on here is that this app component, where we are making use of the button component, is going to handle updating the state of number of clicks, and then we pass that information down as props to the button component. This is also known as lifting the state, where we delegate the responsibility of managing the state to the caller, to the user of the component. Before, we were managing the state in this button component, but now we delegate that responsibility to the parent, in this case app component. So I'll head over here. Now I'll click on photos. You notice that everything is updated, right? Click photos again, click on load post, everything works. So this is how we can, one of the ways at least, we can share information between different components. Okay guys, the next thing is to point out some of the key things to take note of. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you have not done so, to help the channel grow and so that this content will reach to those that need it. Now, some of the key things so far. We said that in React, we make use of JSX to control what is displayed on the screen. And we say that a component returns JSX. Component is responsible for handling what is displayed on the screen using JSX. We said that JSX is similar to HTML, but it's not HTML. It is just a synthetic sugar to React.create element, which is not so developer friendly, I guess, for handling what JSX is doing. We said that we can create our own component, and the naming convention is that the component name should start with capital letter. Otherwise, React will assume that this is HTML tag. So make sure to always start your component with a capital letter. And we can pass what is called prop, which are read-only attribute and value, to component. For example, for our button component, we pass the prop title and handle click and clicks, etc. And over here, of course, you have seen how we can make use of the props. We also say that props can have default value. Example, for the title, we have a default value. Then we say that components can communicate through each other through what we call lifting the state. Before that, we mentioned that a component can manage its own state with the useState hook, which is one of the multiple different hooks that React.js provides us out of the box. But we can also create our own custom hook, which is not part of this lesson. So, to communicate with different components, we let the parent or wherever the component is used handle the state. In this example, we have these clicks that is being handled by the app.js, right? So whether we click this button or we click this other button, whatever, as long as this app.js is what is handling the state, the value for that click is going to remain the same as we have seen. Of course, this is optional. We can decide not to pass down these clicks if we want to. It is not required to pass it down. Or we can pass it down to an entirely different component that has nothing to do with the button click. And then we also say that you can style your component using different approaches. We have demonstrated two here using the CSS module as well as applying and importing some CSS, as in the case of app.css and app.js. So guys, there are so many more you can learn about React. I encourage you to take your time to dive deep as you begin to work with the basic knowledge you have. Dive deep into the React documentation to learn things more in depth and become more proficient. Until next time, happy coding.